Fasting, a millennial practice that transcends cultures and religions, has been an integral part of the human spiritual experience since ancient times. In this video, we will dive deep into this practice, unraveling its mysteries, exploring its benefits, and discovering how it can transform our relationship with the divine. But before we proceed, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you stay updated with all the videos we post here. Let's begin. Fasting is much more than simply abstaining from food. It is an act of devotion, a gesture of humility, and a powerful tool for spiritual transformation. Throughout history, men and women of faith have turned to fasting in times of need, seeking guidance and expressing their commitment to God. Today, in our age of abundance and constant distractions, fasting remains as relevant as ever, offering a way to simplify our lives and refocus our hearts on what truly matters. 1. The essence of fasting. To truly understand fasting, we must look beyond the surface. At its core, fasting is an act of voluntary renunciation. By choosing to give up something we value, whether it's food, entertainment, or anything else, we create space in our lives. This space, this emptiness, becomes an invitation for God to fill. It is in this act of emptying ourselves that we paradoxically become filled with the divine presence. Fasting reminds us of our fundamental dependence on God. In our consumer-driven society, it's easy to fall into the illusion of self-sufficiency. Fasting breaks that illusion, confronting us with our limitations and vulnerabilities. In this state of humility and openness, we become more receptive to God's voice and to the subtle ways He guides us in our lives. Additionally, fasting is an exercise in self-discipline. By resisting the impulses of our body and mind, we strengthen our spiritual will. This strength, cultivated through fasting, extends beyond merely abstaining from food. It influences all areas of our lives, helping us resist temptations and live in alignment with our deepest values and beliefs. 2. Fasting in biblical history. The practice of fasting is deeply rooted in biblical narrative, appearing at critical moments in both the Old and New Testaments. Let's explore some of these key moments and what they teach us about the power and purpose of fasting. In the Old Testament, we find Moses fasting for 40 days and 40 nights on Mount Sinai while receiving the Ten Commandments. This intense period of communion with God was marked by the total absence of food and water, a fast that could only be sustained by divine intervention. Moses' fast teaches us about the deep intimacy with God that can be achieved through this practice. King David, known as a man after God's own heart, frequently turned to fasting during personal and national crises. When his son was gravely ill, David fasted, seeking God's mercy. Although the child did not survive, David's response at the end of the fast demonstrates a profound understanding of its purpose, not as a means to manipulate God, but as a way to submit to His will. The story of Queen Esther offers a powerful example of collective fasting. Before appearing before the king to intercede for her people, Esther called all the Jews in Susa to a 3-day fast. This act of solidarity and collective supplication preceded one of the greatest deliverances in the history of the Jewish people, illustrating the power of communal fasting. The prophet Daniel practiced a unique form of fasting, abstaining from certain foods as part of his devotion to God. The Daniel fast, as it is known today, was not a complete deprivation, but a conscious choice of a simpler diet as an act of consecration. This reminds us that fasting can take many forms, adapting to individual circumstances and callings. In the New Testament, we see Jesus beginning his public ministry with a 40-day fast in the desert. During this time, he faced intense temptations, but emerged strengthened and ready for his mission. Jesus' fast teaches us about the power of this practice in spiritually preparing us for the challenges we face and the tasks God entrusts to us. The apostles and the early church continued the practice of fasting after Jesus' ascension. In the book of Acts, we see the Christian community fasting before making important decisions, such as sending out missionaries. This suggests that fasting was seen as a way to seek divine clarity and direction in matters of great importance. 3. The deep purposes of fasting. By examining biblical examples, we can identify several deep purposes for fasting. Understanding these purposes can help us approach fasting with intention and reverence. One of the primary purposes of fasting is seeking divine direction. In times of uncertainty or when faced with important decisions, fasting helps us tune our hearts and minds to God's will. By silencing the demands of the body, we create space to hear more clearly the still, small voice of God. Fasting also serves as an expression of repentance and a call for spiritual renewal. We see this clearly in the story of Jonah, where the people of Nineveh, upon hearing the message of judgment, declare a collective fast as a sign of their repentance. In this context, fasting is an act of humility and acknowledgement of our need for forgiveness and transformation. Another significant purpose of fasting is intercession. When we fast for others, we express our solidarity with their suffering and our dependence on God to intervene in their lives. Esther's fast for her people is a powerful example of this, showing how fasting can be an act of love and advocacy for others. Fasting also serves as a means of spiritual strengthening and preparation for ministry. Jesus' example in the desert illustrates how fasting can equip us to resist temptations and prepare for the challenges we will face on our journey of faith. Moreover, fasting can be an expression of mourning and a search for divine comfort. In times of loss or deep sorrow, fasting helps us process our emotions and seek the consoling presence of God. Finally, fasting serves as an act of worship and devotion. By choosing to give up something we value out of love for God, we express our devotion and prioritize Him above all things. 4. Jesus' teaching on fasting. In His earthly ministry, Jesus offered important guidance on the practice of fasting. His words help us understand the correct attitude and the pitfalls to avoid when fasting. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus addresses fasting alongside other spiritual practices such as prayer and giving to the needy. He emphasizes the importance of correct motivation, warning against fasting to impress others or gain human approval. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting, Jesus says. He instructs His followers to maintain a normal appearance while fasting, washing their faces and grooming themselves as usual. This instruction reveals a profound truth about fasting. It is primarily a practice between the individual and God. The true value of fasting lies not in the approval or recognition we may receive from others, but in the intimacy and transformation we experience in our relationship with God. Jesus also links fasting to prayer, suggesting that the two practices go hand in hand. When His disciples were unable to cast out a demon, Jesus explained, "This kind can only come out by prayer and fasting." This indicates that fasting, when combined with prayer, can enhance our spiritual effectiveness and empower us to face challenges that would otherwise be insurmountable. It is important to note that while Jesus spoke of fasting as an expected practice for His followers, He did not present it as a legalistic obligation. When questioned about why His disciples did not fast like the Pharisees, Jesus responded with the parable of the bridegroom and the wedding guests, suggesting that there are appropriate times for fasting and times for celebration. 5. Fasting in the Catholic Church. In Catholic tradition, fasting holds a significant place as a spiritual and penitential practice. The Catholic Church has preserved and developed the practice of fasting over the centuries, incorporating it into its liturgical calendar and devotional practices. The period most associated with fasting in the Catholic calendar is Lent, the 40 days preceding Easter. This time is inspired by Jesus' 40-day fast in the desert and serves as a period of spiritual preparation through prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. During Lent, Catholics are called to practice fasting and abstinence from meat on specific days, particularly on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Lenten fasting in the Catholic tradition is not typically a complete fast. It generally involves eating only one full meal per day, with the possibility of two smaller meals that together do not exceed the main meal. Abstinence from meat on Fridays during Lent is another form of penance practiced by Catholics. Beyond Lent, the Catholic Church maintains the tradition of the Eucharistic fast, which requires the faithful to abstain from food and drink, except water and medicine, for at least 1 hour before receiving the Eucharist. This practice is meant to prepare both body and spirit to receive the sacrament. Fasting is also frequently recommended as an act of penance following confession. In this context, fasting serves as an act of reparation for sins and a means to strengthen the resolve to avoid sin in the future. Many Catholics also engage in voluntary fasts for special intentions, such as world peace, religious vocations, or personal and community needs. These fasts can take various forms, from abstaining from certain foods to more rigorous fasts, depending on the individual's spiritual guidance and health. It's important to note that the Catholic Church always emphasizes that fasting should be practiced with discernment and charity. Fasting regulations do not apply to children, the elderly, the sick, or those whose health would be seriously affected by fasting. The Church teaches that the spirit of fasting, self-denial and focus on God, is more important than the letter of the law. 6. Spiritual and practical benefits of fasting. Fasting, when practiced with the right attitude, can bring a variety of spiritual and practical benefits to our lives. Spiritually, fasting helps us develop a greater sensitivity to God's presence. By silencing the demands of the body, many people report greater mental and spiritual clarity, allowing them to hear God's voice more distinctly in their lives. This clarity often leads to moments of spiritual revelation, deep insights about themselves, their relationships, and their life path. Fasting can also be a catalyst for growth in virtues such as patience, perseverance, and self-control. By facing and overcoming the temptation to break the fast, we develop a willpower that extends to other areas of our spiritual and moral life. Many who practice fasting report a deepening of their prayer life. The time usually spent on meals can be redirected to prayer and meditation, leading to a deeper connection with God. Additionally, the experience of physical hunger can remind us of our spiritual hunger for God, making our prayers more fervent and sincere. Fasting can also lead to greater empathy and compassion for others, especially for the less fortunate. The experience of voluntary deprivation can sensitize us to the needs of those who face hunger and deprivation not by choice, but by circumstance. This can inspire us to more frequent and generous acts of charity. On a practical level, fasting can bring health benefits when done wisely. Scientific studies suggest that certain types of intermittent fasting can improve metabolic health, reduce inflammation in the body, and even promote longevity. However, it's important to remember that the primary focus of spiritual fasting is not physical health, but spiritual growth. Fasting can also help break unhealthy patterns of dependence, whether related to food or other habits. By practicing self-control through fasting, we can develop the strength to overcome addictions and compulsive behaviors in other areas of our lives. Many people report greater mental clarity and creativity during fasting periods. The simplification of daily routines that fasting brings can free up mental energy, allowing us to focus on creative or intellectual tasks. Artists, writers, and thinkers throughout history have turned to fasting as a way to stimulate their creativity and intuition. Finally, fasting can help us develop greater gratitude for the blessings in our lives. By temporarily abstaining from something we usually take for granted, such as food or entertainment, we can rediscover the joy and gratitude when we return to these things. 7. Challenges and obstacles in fasting. While fasting offers many benefits, it also presents significant challenges that need to be recognized and addressed. Understanding these obstacles can help us practice fasting more effectively and meaningfully. One of the most immediate challenges is physical discomfort. Hunger, headaches, fatigue, and irritability are common, especially in the early stages of fasting or for those new to this practice. It's important to remember that these symptoms are usually temporary and can be seen as part of the physical and spiritual purification process. Fasting can also intensify temptations and spiritual struggles. As we saw in Jesus' example in the desert, fasting periods can make us more vulnerable to spiritual attacks. However, this vulnerability also offers an opportunity to strengthen our faith and spiritual resistance. Another significant challenge is maintaining spiritual focus during the fast. Paradoxically, hunger and physical discomfort can distract us from our spiritual purpose, making us focus too much on when we'll eat again rather than on God. It's crucial to constantly remind ourselves of the purpose of fasting and redirect our thoughts to God. Legalism is another potential danger. It can be tempting to see fasting as a way to earn God's favor or as a measure of spiritual superiority. We must remember that fasting is a means of grace, not an end in itself, and that our worth in God's eyes does not depend on our ascetic practices. Health issues can be a significant obstacle for some people. Medical conditions such as diabetes, eating disorders, pregnancy, or certain medications can make traditional fasting dangerous. In these cases, it's important to seek medical guidance and consider alternative forms of fasting that do not compromise physical health. Social and cultural pressure can make fasting challenging, especially in societies where food plays a central role in socialization. It can be difficult to explain or maintain fasting in social or professional settings. This requires wisdom, discretion, and sometimes creativity in how we practice and communicate our fasting. Finally, impatience for immediate results can be an obstacle. Fasting is a spiritual discipline that often produces subtle and gradual fruits. The expectation of dramatic transformations or immediate mystical experiences can lead to disillusionment. It's important to approach fasting with patience, persistence, and a willingness to recognize the subtle ways in which God may be working in our lives. 8. Fasting in other religious traditions. While our primary focus is on fasting in the Christian tradition, it is enriching to consider how this practice is observed in other religions. This helps us appreciate the universality of fasting as a spiritual tool and can offer valuable insights for our own practice. In Islam, fasting is one of the 5 pillars of faith. The month of Ramadan is dedicated to daytime fasting, during which Muslims abstain from food, drink, and sexual relations from sunrise to sunset. This annual fast is seen as a time for spiritual purification, self-control, and reflection. Ramadan also emphasizes community and charity, with many Muslims breaking their fast together and making special donations to the poor. In Judaism, the most significant fast occurs on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. This is a full-day fast where Jews abstain from food and drink for 25 hours, dedicating themselves to prayer, repentance, and reconciliation. In addition to Yom Kippur, there are other fasting days in the Jewish calendar, usually associated with historical events or moments of collective penitence. Hinduism incorporates various forms of fasting, or upavasa, into its devotional practices. Hindu fasts can range from total abstinence from food to restricted diets and are often associated with specific festivals or devotional practices to particular deities. Fasting in Hinduism is viewed as a form of purification, self-discipline, and accumulation of spiritual merit. In Buddhism, although the Buddha warned against extreme asceticism, some monks practice fasting as part of their spiritual discipline. In Theravada Buddhism, for example, monks traditionally do not eat after noon. Lay Buddhists may also observe partial fasts on sacred days or during spiritual retreats. Jainism, an ancient Indian religion, places a strong emphasis on fasting as a means of spiritual purification and detachment from the material world. Jain fasts can be very rigorous, with some practitioners engaging in prolonged fasts that may last for weeks or even months. In Sikhism, while fasting is not an obligatory practice, some Sikhs fast as a form of self-discipline and devotion. However, Sikhism emphasizes moderation and discourages extreme ascetic practices. Many Native American religions incorporate fasting into their spiritual practices, often as part of vision quest rituals or healing ceremonies. These fasts are seen as forms of purification and as a way to open communication with the spiritual world. When observing these various fasting traditions, we can note some common themes: purification, self-discipline, the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment, and connection with the divine. These similarities suggest that fasting touches on something fundamental in the human experience of seeking the sacred. 9. Fasting in modern life. In our age of abundance and instant gratification, fasting may seem like a countercultural practice. However, many are rediscovering the value of this ancient spiritual discipline amid the complexities of modern life. Fasting offers a powerful counterpoint to the culture of overconsumption and constant distraction that characterizes much of contemporary society. Incorporating fasting into modern life requires creativity and adaptation. For many, traditional prolonged fasts may not be practical due to professional or family demands. However, there are various ways to integrate the spirit of fasting into our daily routines. One approach is to practice regular mini-fasts. This could involve skipping a meal once a week and dedicating that time to prayer or reflection. This practice, although brief, can serve as a regular reminder of our spiritual priorities amid the demands of everyday life. Another option is intermittent fasting, which has gained popularity recently for its potential health benefits. While many practice it mainly for physical reasons, this form of fasting can also be infused with spiritual meaning. For example, limiting food intake to an 8-hour window each day can create space for spiritual practices during the fasting hours. Social media and technology fasting is becoming increasingly relevant in our digital age. Abstaining from social media platforms, television, or general smartphone use for defined periods can create valuable space for silence, reflection, and connection with God. This type of fasting can be particularly powerful in combating mental distraction and the technology addiction that many experience. Thematic fasts can also be significant in modern life. For example, someone might choose to fast for a specific cause, such as social justice, world peace, or environmental healing. This not only gives a focus to the fast, but can also inspire action and engagement in important issues. The practice of consumption fasting is gaining traction among those seeking simplicity and sustainability. This may involve abstaining from non-essential purchases for a period, redirecting resources to charity, or simply cultivating contentment with what one already has. For those with particularly busy schedules, the concept of fasting in motion can be helpful. This involves integrating the spirit of fasting into daily activities. For instance, turning the commute to work into a time for prayer, or using coffee breaks as moments for spiritual reflection. The practice of fasting in modern life also invites us to examine our consumption habits and dependencies. We live in a society that often promotes excess and instant gratification. Fasting, in contrast, teaches us the value of moderation, waiting, and appreciation. It can be a powerful tool to free us from unhealthy behavior patterns and help us cultivate a more balanced relationship with the material world. Additionally, fasting can serve as an antidote to the frenetic pace of modern life. In a world that values constant productivity, allowing oneself to slow down, whether through abstaining from food or other forms of fasting, can be a revolutionary act of self-care and spiritual growth. Fasting in modern life can also be an expression of global solidarity. In an interconnected world where we are constantly confronted with images of suffering and injustice, fasting can be a way to connect empathetically with those who suffer. It can inspire us to compassionate action and remind us of our responsibility to one another. However, it is crucial to maintain balance when practicing fasting in modern life. The goal is not to add more stress or pressure to already overloaded lives, but to create space for what is truly important. Fasting should free us for a greater connection with God and others, not burden us with yet another item on our spiritual to-do list. 10. Preparation and practice of fasting. For those who wish to incorporate fasting into their spiritual journey, it is important to approach this practice with wisdom and adequate preparation. Here are some guidelines and considerations for an effective and meaningful fasting practice. Define your intention. Before starting a fast, reflect on your purpose. Be clear about why you are fasting and what you hope to achieve spiritually. Writing down your intention can help maintain focus during the fast. Choose the type of fast. There are many types of fasting, from total abstinence from food to partial fasts, or fasting from specific activities. Choose a type of fast that is appropriate for your life situation and health status. Prepare physically. If you plan to fast from food, prepare your body in the days leading up to it by eating lighter meals and increasing your water intake. This can help minimize physical discomfort during the fast. Prepare spiritually. Dedicate time to prayer and reflection before the fast. Seek divine guidance and strength for the fasting period. Plan your time. Decide in advance how you will use the time usually spent on meals or the activities you are abstaining from. Plan periods for prayer, Bible reading, or other spiritual activities. Be flexible. Remember that fasting is a spiritual practice, not a test of endurance. If you experience health issues during the fast, it is appropriate to modify or end the fast. Stay hydrated. If you are fasting from food, it is crucial to stay hydrated. Unless you are undertaking a total fast supervised for specific medical or religious reasons, drink plenty of water. Break the fast gradually. When ending a food fast, start with small portions of light, easy-to-digest foods. Gradually increase to normal meals. Reflect and integrate. After the fast, take time to reflect on the experience. What did you learn? How did you feel closer to God? How can you integrate the insights from the fast into your daily life? Consider regular fasting. Many find it beneficial to incorporate fasting as a regular practice in their spiritual life. This can be weekly, monthly, or seasonal, depending on what works best for you. Seek community. Consider fasting with others. Mutual support can be encouraging, and sharing experiences can enrich everyone's journey. Maintain perspective. Remember that fasting is not an end in itself, but a means to deepen your relationship with God. Do not become legalistic or use fasting as a measure of spiritual superiority. 11. Overcoming common obstacles in fasting. Even with careful preparation, it is common to encounter obstacles during fasting. Here are some common difficulties and suggestions for overcoming them. Hunger and physical discomfort. It is normal to feel hungry during a food fast. When hunger arises, use it as a reminder to pray or meditate. Drinking water can help alleviate feelings of hunger. Fatigue and weakness. Reduce intense physical activities during the fast. Allow yourself more rest. Remember that physical weakness can make us more spiritually receptive. Irritability. Fasting can affect our mood. Be aware of this and practice patience with yourself and others. Use moments of irritability as opportunities to practice self-control. Distractions. It is common for the mind to wander during fasting, especially to thoughts about food. When this happens, gently redirect your attention to your spiritual purpose. Temptations. Fasting can intensify temptations. Have a plan for dealing with them, such as prayer, Bible reading, or seeking support from a trusted friend. Social pressure. It can be difficult to maintain a fast in social situations. Be discreet about your fast and have prepared responses for questions about why you are not eating. Doubts. it is natural to question the value or effectiveness of fasting, especially if you do not see immediate results. Remember that spiritual growth is often subtle and gradual. Guilt for breaking the fast. If you break the fast earlier than planned, do not blame yourself. Use it as an opportunity to reflect on your motivations and start again with renewed understanding. 12. Fasting as a journey of transformation. As you consider incorporating fasting into your own spiritual journey, do so with wisdom, grace, and an open heart. May the space created by fasting be filled with the presence of God, leading to a life of greater purpose, compassion, and connection with the divine. In our society of abundance and constant distraction, fasting offers a powerful counterpoint, calling us back to simplicity, gratitude, and dependence on God. Whether through abstaining from food, social media, or anything else that occupies a central place in our lives, fasting gives us the opportunity to reassess what truly matters. Remember, fasting is not a spiritual competition or a way to earn God's favor. It is an expression of humility, an acknowledgement of our need for God, and a means of opening ourselves more fully to His transforming grace. May your practice of fasting be a source of spiritual renewal, clarity, and a meaningful expression of your faith. As we conclude our exploration of fasting, it is important to remember that this ancient practice is not just about abstaining from something, but about creating space for a deeper connection with God. Fasting invites us on a journey of transformation, challenging our dependencies, reorienting our priorities, and opening our hearts to the divine presence in new and profound ways.